Hello and welcome everyone to the breathARMY introductory video series. My name is Jeff. I'm the founder of breathARMY, and this video series has been designed to educate, inspire, and empower you to live to your true potential. And in this series we answer many of the questions that I've been asked over and over again in the many years of teaching and training and facilitating the different experiences that I have through breathARMY. And in this video, we are going to talk a little bit about cold exposure, one of my absolute favorite practices that has had a huge impact in my life. I'll talk a little bit about my own personal experience with cold exposure, as well as some of the benefits to cold exposure and some of the tips that I like to share with people that are new to this practice, or maybe have been using this as a practice and want to go a little bit deeper with it. And so my own personal experience with cold has been one that started at a very young age. I grew up in a small mountain town in British Columbia. I worked out in the mountains, and oftentimes the only place that we had to bathe was in a cold river or a cold lake. But at that time, I didn't like the cold very much, and I actually really actively tried to avoid the cold. And basically from September through May, I always had on a toque, pair of long johns, and an extra shirt to try and keep me warm. And I was one of those people that was always cold. Didn't matter what I did, I was always cold, and I was very often sick. And I went through life, very much of the early part of my life, in that way, trying to avoid the cold. And eventually I ended up many years later working on an island called Galiano Island, which is a small island off the coast of British Columbia near Vancouver. And at that time I was working over there as a paramedic, and it was early spring, and I had been struggling with chronic sinus infections for much of my life. It was early spring, there was a ton of pollen in the air, and my sinuses were going crazy. And at that time, I came across a podcast with Tim Ferriss, and he was speaking to a man named Wim Hof. And I was so struck by the conviction and the passion that Wim had in his message of sharing simple natural tools like breathwork and cold exposure, that I thought, wow, I just have to give this a try, because I had been already bought into the power of breathwork and had had a pranayama practice for many years at that point. So I knew the power of the breath, and I thought, what do I have to lose by giving the cold a try? And so Galiano Island is surrounded by cold Pacific waters year-round, and so I started going in the ocean. I started going in for about 7 minutes a day, and I increased by about a minute a day until I got to about 25 minutes, and then I realized that was way too long, and that I didn't need to go in the ocean for that long. But what I did find was that I felt a whole lot better. My sinus infections went away, and my mood was so much improved just through that practice of going in the cold every day. And having been somebody who had struggled with depression for a lot of my life and had struggled with mood, found that living in Canada in the wintertime was really challenging for me. Anything that I can do to improve my mood, I find has a profound impact on the rest of my life as well. So I was hooked on it really, really quickly. And I decided that I wanted to study it, learn more about it, and share it with other people. So I did my Wim Hof method training, and I traveled around the world to study and train with Wim. Eventually I did my advanced Wim Hof method instructors training, and at this point I've literally guided thousands of people through an ice bath experience, whether that be through a workshop or the retreats that I've led, taking people into cold, frigid waters in the middle of winter time here in Canada when it's minus 20 out, and have seen some incredible benefits to people through engaging in these practices in a consistent basis, and not just with other people, but I've noticed the benefits in my own life as well. And it's one of my go-to practices, that if I don't have very much time to spend on myself, that I will go to breathwork and cold exposure as my two non-negotiables that I try and practice every day. And I've been practicing cold exposure pretty much every day now for about 5 to 6 years. So the many benefits, there is so many different benefits to cold exposure, and you've probably read and heard about many of them on the internet. And a lot of those benefits are physiological benefits. So we have things like reducing inflammation in the body. Because inflammation is such a chronic issue in our world, anything that we can do to reduce inflammation in the body and mind is of huge benefit. Reducing inflammation and improving the functioning of our immune system. Simple, natural tool that can improve the functioning of our immune system and help us to fight off infections in our body. Well, again, that's just a no-brainer. That would be something that we would want to engage in, if at all possible, to help fight off those infections and improve immunity. Helping to strengthen the vasculature system and helping to flush out the lymphatic system as well. Huge benefits. But some of the most important benefits in my own life and the benefits that I see in other people are the effects on mood, being able to regulate and stabilize or improve people's mood. And that was one of the huge ones that I've noticed in my life, and one of the reasons why I continue to engage in this practice almost every day. Is that, and I find that anything that we can do to improve the quality of our mood helps to improve absolutely everything else in our lives as well. But then there's also the piece around resiliency and doing something that we really don't want to do and we actually might be really afraid of doing. Doing that practice every single day starts to build a resiliency and a strength within us that helps us to work through all of the other issues that we find ourselves in our lives. It helps us to better regulate and manage the way that we deal with stress. And when we do that thing that we really don't want to do, it helps us to do all of the other things that we don't want to do. And life is full of things that we might not want to do, but we know are going to be a benefit in our lives. And so this is a really easy practice. It's super quick. It doesn't take very long, but it helps us to get better at doing those things that we don't want to do. And as a result of doing those things, the thing that I've noticed in my own life and other people's lives who engage with this practice on a consistent basis is that they continue to improve and their lives start to unfold in really beautiful and magical ways. So that's really, really profound. Cold exposure can come in many different ways. So a lot of people think about getting in an ice bath or getting in cold water. That's my favorite way to engage with cold exposure. But a cold shower is a great way to get started. Starting out with 30 seconds in a cold shower is one of the best ways that we can introduce this practice into our lives. It's super safe and it's super easy to really moderate that experience. We can have a nice warm shower and then just turn the water on cold for the last 30 seconds. And other ways would be to just go outside in the cold with one less layer of clothing on. To turn the thermostat down in our house. We could do cryotherapy. There's lots of different ways that we can engage with cold. One of the most important tips that I give to people when I'm teaching about cold exposure is to learn how to soften, surrender, and feel the experience fully. A lot of the sensations that we can experience when we engage in cold exposure we will perceive as negative or not very enjoyable when we first experience them. And that is one of the really powerful pieces around cold exposure because we can start to address the underlying stories behind those perceptions, the stories that our mind starts to tell us about our experience. Once we start to gain a practice of addressing and observing those stories, then we can start to observe where we're telling ourselves stories in the rest of our lives. And again, that's a really powerful practice. But learning how to surrender into the cold and soften into the cold is really important. A lot of people, when they're new to this practice, feel like they need to fight through it, like they need to muscle their way through it and push their way through it. And to me, that's the exact opposite of what we want to do. We want to learn how to soften into the experience. We want to learn how to allow ourselves to feel everything that's going on within our body, within our mind during that experience, and start to develop this way of being the observer to that experience instead of being so attached to those thoughts, to the sensations, to the stories around them. We want to start to create a little bit of space. We do that by coming back to the breath, coming back to the body, and just observing, just being, and detaching any significance to the stories that our mind is telling us. Of course, we need to be mindful with this practice. Cold is a hormetic stressor, so in large doses, it can cause injury or death. And so we want to be really conscious of that when we're engaging with it and be super, super safe. If there's any history of any kind of cardiac illness, we want to check with our doctor before engaging in these techniques. But provided that we're of sound mental and physical health, then we still want to be really cautious. If we're going out in nature, always take a friend with you. And even if you're just practicing at home, it can be good to have somebody with you as you practice. But learning how to soften, learning how to surrender into that experience, learning how to feel within our bodies. So many of us live from here up, and we never really come down into the body and allow ourselves to feel. In order to heal, we need to feel. And so for that, cold exposure is a really powerful practice. Another tip that I give people is to be consistent with your practice. So if you decide that this is something that you want to bring into your life, maybe start with that cold shower and tell yourself that you're going to commit to that practice every day for 10, 20, maybe 30 days, and just see what the effects are within your body and mind. Because we need to have that consistent practice to really notice how that particular practice is affecting us over a longer term. And these practices aren't for everybody. And all of these different types of practices like breath work or yoga or meditation have a very personal experiential quality to them. They're different for everybody. We all come to them with different nervous systems, different experiences, different backgrounds, and we need to find the ones that work for us. And so we can only do that through engaging with them in a consistent way for an extended period of time so that we can really identify what the changes are and whether that's a beneficial practice for us. So those would be a couple of the tips that I wanted to share with you that I hope could help you to bring this practice into your life. And I would love to hear any comments that you have if this is already a practice of yours, if you have any questions about engaging with the cold, how to go about it, or any of the effects, any of the things that you're feeling in your body. I would love to hear about that, so feel free to address those in the comments below. And yeah, check out the rest of this video series. We got lots of great videos coming up, and I hope to see you in another video online or maybe in person here again soon. Bye for now.